look, people are joining. I'm just going to wait a couple more minutes to see if anybody else joins. Let's see if I can. Hi, Rise Oxford. Hi. Hi, Edward. Hey, everybody. All right. Well, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Meg Hayden, and I am the nurse at Oxford High School and also the Generation Free sponsor. So I'm just really grateful to be here today with you all. Grateful that I was invited to come and be a guest live performer on the Generation Free page. I'm also the co-sponsor of a group at Oxford High School called Rise Oxford High, and we are a peer wellness group. We have about 40 students who are certified peer educators, and we provide wellness resources and wellness education to the students at the Oxford School District. And so I encourage you all to follow at Rise Oxford High on Instagram for lots of resources, contests, challenges. We have mindfulness practices Mondays at 11 and yoga, mindfulness for teens and yoga for teens on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11. So go follow at Rise Oxford High. So I was asked to join today and talk about something that has been very personally helpful for me in my life. And so I wanted to share it with you all because especially during this time where we are under a little bit more stress than usual and at home, sheltering in place, I wanted to share and introduce the idea of mindfulness to those of you who may not know what it is. And so I think there's a lot of preconceived notions about like when you hear the word mindfulness or you hear the word meditation, oftentimes we get these images that may be true in some circumstances, but they don't really encompass all of what mindfulness actually is. And so really it's just very, very simple. Mindfulness, all mindfulness is just paying attention to where you are and what you're doing in the present moment, right? We spend so much of our time living in the past and living in the future. And so what I mean by this is, how much of your time do you think you actually spend worrying about something that's already happened, right? Regretting something that's happened or feeling guilty or thinking about a conversation or a situation with someone that's already happened, or being concerned about the future. And so, for example, right now is a time where a lot of us are worried about the future because it's somewhat uncertain. And so that can create a lot of stress and anxiety for us. But the truth is that the only moment that we really actually have is the very moment that we're in. And so it's ironic almost that we spend the least amount of time in that present moment. So mindfulness, that's all it is paying attention in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And it's just really, it's just a simple and powerful tool for awakening this wisdom that we already have inside of us. And it's something that's been used for thousands of years. And more recently, like in recent decades, it's been the use of mindfulness has been sort of distilled down and made more mainstream. So it's a word that you hear more often now, and it's used in the medical world. It's used in psychology. A lot of corporate environments use mindfulness now, and the military, and more now we're seeing it in the world of education. So why would one want to practice mindfulness, right? So we know the what, that it's just simply paying attention to the present moment. But why would we want to practice this? How does it benefit us? And so I think if we think about it in the way that how much time we spend, for example, on school, right? We spend a lot of time developing our intelligence and trying to learn these different facts, and, we have to do well on our tests and that sort of thing. And the amount of time that we spend strengthening our bodies, right? Or trying to improve whatever sport we're involved in. But we don't really give our mind very much attention, right? Or our emotional well-being very much attention. And so this is how we can do that, right? Mindfulness is a way that we can develop and strengthen our mind and pay attention to our emotions and how we're feeling, and in a lot of ways can prevent a lot of negative mental health issues that we could face. So it also increases our ability to focus. It increases our ability to be able to just recognize and manage our emotions, make better decisions, and empathize in our relationships with other people. So in that way, it is just really helpful for us across the board. The thing about mindfulness is that in order for it to work, it's something that we really have to try. And for a lot of people, if you've never tried mindfulness before, it can seem really weird and really pointless, right? And so it's important to keep in mind that it's normal that it feels weird, and it's normal that it feels pointless at first. And it's one of those things, like with a lot of self-care, that the cumulative effect is what's most beneficial. So oftentimes when you practice mindfulness once, then you do feel better, you feel calmer, and that sort of thing. But the cumulative effect of practicing small practices of mindfulness is so beneficial for you in the long run. So I encourage you, if you enjoy this practice, to search out ways to practice mindfulness on your own. And just to kind of backtrack, when we talk about mindfulness, it can be three things, right? It can be a state, or it can be a trait, or it can be a practice. And so what do I mean by that? So a state could be a moment of mindfulness, right? So for example, you could be doing any normal everyday activity. You could be at the sink washing your hands, for example, right? And if you were to be mindful while you're washing your hands at the sink, that would just mean that you, when you turn the water on, maybe you pay attention to what the temperature of the water is, and how the water feels on your hands, and what the soap smells like, and then what it feels like when you're rubbing the soap on your hands, and then how it feels for the water to wash the soap off, right? You're just being there in that moment instead of being in your mind somewhere else, right? Like we talked about before, being somewhere in the past or worrying about something in the future. So you can practice a state of mindfulness in anything that you do. I know that we've all had the experience of trying to have a conversation with someone that's distracted, for example, right? So you're in a conversation with someone who is looking at their phone, looking at Instagram, watching the Generation Pre live, instead of paying attention to what you're saying to them. And that's a very different experience than when you're in a conversation with someone who's making eye contact with you and nodding and interacting with you, right? Because the person who is making eye contact and nodding and interacting is being mindful. So that's just another great example. You can practice mindfulness when you're eating. You can practice mindfulness in anything that you do. So, but that would be an example of a state, right? A moment of mindfulness. Mindfulness can also be a trait that we experience. And what that means is when you practice mindfulness consistently on a regular basis, the goal is for it to be something that is habitual for you, right? So that you live in a state that is more mindful, so that you are spending more of your time in the present moment than you are in that sort of state of living in the past or the future. And then it can be a practice. And so a practice, a formal mindfulness practice, is usually in the form of what we call meditation. And so that is, we're going to do a short mindfulness practice here in just a minute. But one of the really, really beneficial things about practicing mindfulness is your ability to identify how you feel in your body. And this is something that many of us are not very aware of, right? So when we have different emotions, for example, like anger or sadness or anxiety, we have a physical feelings in our body that come up and that we may not be as aware of as we could be, right? And so one thing that mindfulness does is it makes us aware of those physical sensations in our body that signal to us how we're feeling, right? And so why is this helpful? Well, have you ever said something to someone that you wish that you could take back? Have you ever done something that you regretted? So maybe give me a wave or a heart if you have ever said something you wish you hadn't said or done something that you later regretted. Oh wait, there's Lady Tina. All right. Have you ever felt angry or out of control or felt nervous or anxious about an exam maybe? Been in a bad mood and not sure why you were in a bad mood, but you just woke up that way? Felt like you needed a break and wanted everyone to leave you alone? Had trouble falling asleep because you couldn't get your mind to shut down or turn off and your body feels restless? Or how about accidentally spacing out in class, right? That's something that probably many of you experience. So all of these are things that if you experience these things in your life, then mindfulness would be very useful for you and relevant for you. You know, our emotions are always changing, continually changing. And difficult emotions like anger, fear, worry, and stress actually release chemicals in our brain that prevent us from learning. And they sometimes make us react and say things and do things that we don't want to do. And mindfulness can actually help stop these chemicals, right? And so that's one really important thing about mindfulness that you need to know, that how it can be helpful for you. And so what it does is when you are able to be aware of what you're feeling in your body and what emotion that is, that moment that you take to be aware. So let's say somebody cuts you off in traffic, right? Or somebody says something to you, or maybe a teacher calls you out and you have that moment, you know, whatever it is that you experience in your body when you feel angry or you feel defensive, right? So maybe you feel a hot flash, or maybe you get sweaty, or maybe your stomach gets a certain feeling, or maybe your chest gets tight, or think about like when you get anxious for a test, how does that feel in your body? Do you get butterflies? Does your chest tense up? So mindfulness allows you to be aware of what that feeling is. And as you take that moment to be aware of the feeling, you're creating a space. And you're creating a space between what the stimulus is, and that feeling in your body, and how you react or respond. Because you can do two things in a situation that makes you uncomfortable, that makes you angry or anxious. You can either react or you can respond, right? And our goal here with mindfulness is to learn to respond. And that means that there's a space between that stimulus and between the response. Okay? And that space between the stimulus and the response is what allows you to make a choice about how you respond instead of emotionally reacting. Okay? So I am going to... Does anybody have any questions? Do you want to type a question in the comments? Lots of waves. Cassidy Rock! Yay! Okay, so All right, so I am first we're going to talk about a mindful body position. So when you practice mindfulness meditation, you can do it in any comfortable position. Some people sit cross-legged, some people like to lie down. I really prefer, and the best way to practice this is to sit up straight in a chair that has a back. Having back support is really nice because it's nice to be able to keep your back straight and to put your feet on the floor. And when you have your feet on the floor, it allows you to have a feeling of groundedness because your feet are grounded down into the earth. And it's really important to try to have a straight spine in your mindful practice. And you really want your mind and body to try to be relaxed, but you also want to be alert. So it does happen sometimes if you practice mindfulness when you're tired that you fall asleep. But the goal is not to fall asleep unless you're practicing mindfulness meditation at night to go to sleep, which is also a thing that you can do. But for the purposes of today's exercise, the goal is not to fall asleep. All right. And so what we're going to do is, if all of you want to practice with me, we are going to get in our mindful body positions, right? So sit in a chair, put your feet on the floor and sit up straight. And we're just going to do a little practice that is short. And all right, is everybody ready? All right. So today's practice is what I like to call an anchor practice. And what we're going to do in this practice is focus on something that's happening in us all the time, and that's our breath, right? So we are breathing constantly. But we don't often pay attention to our breath or pay attention to our breathing. But the breath is something that we have, and a resource that we have with us all the time that we can tap into at any moment. And it is so, so powerful in helping bring us back to the present moment, which is of course the point of all this, right? And the breath is neutral. It's not a strong emotion. It's not something to hate or something to love. It's just there with us. Well, actually, we could love it, right? Because it's there for us all day, every day. And we're breathing in and we breathe it out. And we can just find it anytime that we need it, right? So with your eyes open now, let's just take one deep breath. So breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And now what we're going to do is, if you would all close your eyes with me, we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to take a deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. And now, continuing to keep your eyes closed, we are going to start taking breaths that are just normal. Okay, so just breathe in and out normally with your eyes closed. Don't try to change the breath. Don't try to do anything special with it. I just want you to pay attention to it, right? Like I said, we're always doing this. It's there for us all the time, but we don't often take the time to just pay attention to it. And so as you're breathing in and out with your eyes closed, I want you to try to think about where you feel the breath the most in your body, okay? So as you breathe in, you might, for example, feel your breath the most in your nostrils as you breathe it in. Another place that's really common for us to feel it is in our chest. So as you breathe in, you may notice that your chest rises, and that may be the place that you feel the breath the most. Another place that you may feel it the most is in your belly. So oftentimes when we breathe, especially deeply down into our belly, we feel the belly rise, and that's where we feel the most sensation. Wherever you feel it as you're breathing in and out is completely normal and completely fine. I just want you to try to identify where you feel the breath the most in the body when you're really just paying attention to it. And that point is going to be what we call your anchor. So once you identify the place in your body that you feel your breath the most, I want you to focus on it. If it's your chest or your belly, you can even take a hand and just place it right there. And I want you to just spend, maybe we'll do 5 or 6 more breaths just focusing on how the breath feels in that place as we breathe in and breathe out. How does the breath feel in your anchor? And sometimes, it's very normal. A lot of people think when you're practicing mindfulness that you aren't supposed to think or that you aren't supposed to have thoughts. And that's not true. There is just not a way for our brains to turn off, right? We're humans and we think, and that's what we do. So it's easy to get lost in thinking that you're doing something wrong, but there is no wrong way to do this, okay? If you find that it's hard to focus on your anchor as you're breathing in and breathing out, one thing you can do is just say to yourself, breathing in, say to yourself in your mind, not out loud, breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. And we'll just take 3 more breaths like this. Focusing on our anchor and breathing in and breathing out. All right, now you can open your eyes. So that was just a short practice where we can use our breath to be the focal point to bring us into this present moment, and also find our anchor. And so your breath and that anchor are available to you all the time, any moment of the day, and you can always go there and go to them as a resource, okay? And so the more that you practice this in a formal way, so let's say now that you're at home, you have more time to do something like this, you can spend a little time in the morning, just 5 minutes, 6 minutes, or spend a little time in the evening practicing it. And the more that you practice it consistently, the more it will become habitual for you, as I said before, and that you will remember that resource is there for you in moments that are difficult. So when we practice it in moments that are easy to practice it in, it becomes easier and more available to us in those hard and difficult moments, right? All right. So does anybody have any questions? Oh, thank you, Edward and Lady Tina. Well, I really appreciate you all being here, and I'm so grateful that I was able to come here and share this practice with you. And I really appreciate you guys. And if you have any questions or you want to get in touch, please come follow at Rise Oxford High. We do a mindfulness practice for teens every Monday at 11 a.m. on our Instagram Live, so join us there, or Yoga for Teens on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 a.m. And so hopefully we will see you there. All right, you guys have a great evening.